Hi, Eastown. It is wonderful to be with you this morning. If you are watching live with us joining, or if you are listening via audio at some point during your week, we are glad that you are joining in. And it is a gift to be entering in with you right after this Thanksgiving week. And the chances are you and I have experienced something relatively similar over the last couple of weeks. For some of us, its arrival was kind of unexpected and it felt sudden. But for others, its arrival has felt like it's just been too slow. For some of you, the first signs of it seemed totally unwelcomed. And when you started seeing things appear around you, you might have felt like a little check in your spirit, kind of uncertain if it was good or okay or right for this thing to be happening so early. For others, it brought a sense of joy as you experienced it, and you wondered where it had been all year. And on both sides of the issue, everyone was wondering how and when the argument seemed to have become so polarizing. I am, of course, talking about how early is too early to begin celebrating Christmas. How soon is too soon to start listening to Christmas music? And how early is too early to put up your Christmas lights? I will say over the last few years, I've gotten a little bit lax on my rule and my thought. I was a pretty firm Friday after Thanksgiving decorator and listener of Christmas music. But as I've gotten older and as the years have passed by, I feel like there are some years that I just need a little bit more Christmas cheer sooner in my year. That rhymed. I hope you appreciated that. So Christmas cheer, I do love it. But I think one of the really interesting things about the Christmas season is that it's a season that so many people wait for all year. It is, as a mom in Home Alone says, a season of perpetual hope. It's a season that evokes in most of us a longing for light and goodness and hope. Christmas seems like a bright spot for many people in the midst of some of the darkest days. I've realized for me that a lot of my own longing, I think, has to do with daylight savings time and kind of the shortening of the daylight that we experience because of the winter season. When we set our clocks back at the beginning of November, the darkness comes earlier in the afternoon, and I find myself longing for more light. I feel disoriented for weeks after we shift the clocks. And I know I'm not alone because over dinner with friends over the past couple of weeks, there have been multiple moments where we finish dinner and I am certain that it has to be 10 p.m., but then I look and it is in fact only 7 o'clock. I don't know how it happens. The time warp in daylight saving season really just boggles my mind. But the point is, there is a disorientation that comes when light shifts. And there's kind of an awareness that is piqued in each of us for a longing for light. So today, I want us to explore a little bit that longing for light. I want to talk about Jesus and how he is a light to our weary world. And I want to talk about the vision that he had to bring hope to each one of us. So to begin, let's dig a little bit deeper into light. When I think of light, I think of it in 2 different ways. The first way is very, very practical and literal. The sun brings light to the day, and in the nighttime, my Google light bulb brings light to my evening when I ask it to turn on. Light makes the darkness less dark, and it helps us see the world around us. But the second way that I think about light is a little bit more of a figurative way. It's kind of like a feeling. For me, light as a feeling is this feeling of joy and freedom, contentedness, and a generally like worry-free presence. We know that it doesn't have to be literally dark or literally light around us in order for us to feel and experience that feeling of lightness or that feeling of darkness. Darkness can be felt in so many different ways. Darkness can be felt in our unmet expectations, in our broken hearts, or just as we interact with the pain of this world. Oftentimes, seasons of waiting can feel dark. Darkness as a feeling perpetuates kind of as a feeling of hopelessness. And darkness as a feeling is the feeling that something is not as it should be. Darkness makes us long for light. And when Jesus entered the scene, the state of the world was really heavy. It was not exactly how it should have been. The Jewish people at the time were in deep despair because of the Roman rule that was surrounding them. And there were unjust social systems that they had to deal with every single day. But there was also another added layer of darkness that the people had to deal with. You see, prior to Jesus' arrival, the Jewish people had a 400-year period of silence where God wasn't showing up in the ways that the people had become accustomed to. In much of the Old Testament, which is kind of like the first half of the Bible, in much of the Old Testament, we see God on the move. He is visibly showing up in the lives of his people. He's using prophets to guide the people and speak to them. But after the prophet Malachi, which is the very last book in the Old Testament, things begin to shift. We enter into this 400-year period of silence where God stops speaking to his people. You see, it's important to note that in these 400 years, it didn't mean that God wasn't present or that he wasn't moving among his people. He did not abandon them. But I would imagine that the people felt a bit of darkness and lack of hope when they thought about the God who had once been so clearly guiding them and then seemed to have not been showing up in the way that they expected. It was essentially 400 years of waiting. Hope would have been passed down from one generation to the next as they shared the stories of the ways that God had once moved among his people. But generations of people, these were just stories that they had heard. And these generations of people had just been hoping and waiting for God to appear and show up again. The people at the time were living in darkness, longing for a bit of hope and light to enter in. And in the book of Isaiah, which is in the Old Testament, it's a prophetic book where Isaiah prophesies about these things that will happen down the road in the future. And in chapter 9, we find a very Christmassy passage that maybe you have heard before. It says the words, "For unto us a child is born." And it goes on to say that his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and Prince of Peace. But before these words were said, at the very end of Isaiah chapter 8, we read about how the people of Israel were going to mediums and psychics for guidance in this season. In that season of waiting, the people were hurting. And instead of turning to God, many of them looked towards the world for guidance and wisdom. And Isaiah tells them that they will look to the earth, but behold, darkness and distress, the gloom of anguish, and they will be thrust into thick darkness. It is in that space that Isaiah sees the people around him looking to the world for hope and healing and guidance, that he speaks of the coming of Jesus. And he says, the people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who have dwelt in a land of deep darkness, on them light has shone. Isaiah is saying that the people won't find the light that they're looking for in the world around them. And as I think about our world today, I think about the ways that we often look towards politics and the pursuit of knowledge and technological advancements as our own source of guidance. We are looking for light to come in and guide us out of our dark situations. We find this scripture from Isaiah actually being referenced in the book of Matthew in the New Testament it's a gospel that talks about Jesus coming. We get it at the very, very beginning, and it starts this thread of an image of Jesus being portrayed as light. And this was done specifically by Matthew because he wanted to connect the dots for the readers. He doesn't want the Israelites to miss that this man walking the earth is the very child who Isaiah prophesied about being born as the light of the world. And then the thread continues in other books in the New Testaments. The Gospel of John opens by Jesus saying that the Gospel of John opens talking about Jesus, and it says, "In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." And he continues and says, the true light, which gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. Jesus himself, when he was walking the earth, said, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." The gospel writers aren't talking about Jesus bringing literal light into the spaces that he entered into. Although I will take a brief pause because the image of Jesus kind of being like a nightlight wherever he went because of a glow around him, I think deserves a quick pause and a moment of appreciation of how funny that could be. But the point is, they're not talking about Jesus being like a literal physical light. They're talking about the figurative light that Jesus brings as the hope of the world. Readers of the Gospels can go on to see the ways that Jesus brought light into the darkness around him. Corrupt systems were called out. Those on the margins were seen, and the sick were healed of their diseases. Light enters into the darkness, and that light brings vision for the people. And it's obvious, but when light enters in, it helps us see. It brings literal vision out of what was dark before. And I think it's helpful, although obvious, to pause and remember how different light is today than it was hundreds, let alone thousands of years ago. Prior to the invention of electricity, the world was ruled by the movement of the sun. To get light at night, it would cost you time in the day. You'd have to gather firewood or oil for the lamps in the house in order to be prepared for the looming darkness. Today, light doesn't cost us much, although our energy bills might tell us differently sometimes. But with the flip of a switch, we are able to change our view and have vision in the dark of night. And although the availability and our access to light is different today than it was for our ancestors, the basic function remains the same. Light literally brings vision for us to see. But figuratively speaking, light that enters into dark places brings vision of what could be different. To say it another way, light enters into dark places, and what can come from that light is a vision of a different kind of life. It's the addict becoming deeply aware of the darkness around them, and they believe for a brief moment that things could potentially look different for them. It's the person whose schedule is so full that they feel like they have no time to spare, and they have a brief interaction with someone who has margin in their life, and by seeing the light in their life, vision enters into their own life. It's the person who has longed for a deep friendship for years. And through an invitation to join a life group or share a meal together, they get a vision of a life filled with community. You see, I believe it is the Spirit of God who helps bring awareness of those light-filled moments that then leads for us to have vision of a different kind of life. And I wonder for you if there are any places in life where you've lost vision. Maybe you used to be excited about your job, but now you dread going to work. The relationships you had in life seem to be flourishing, but now they just seem stagnant. Or just maybe spending time with God was something that you once yearned for inside of you, but for whatever reason, you have lost the desire to make time for it. What would this Christmas season look like if we had a bit more vision? If we started this next year with a clearer picture of what God had in front of us. And if that's something that we are longing for, I think that it means that we need to pay attention to light a bit more in our lives in order for us to receive vision. Light gives us vision. And it is through that vision that hope is then cultivated in us. Light and vision brought by the Spirit of God gives us hope. And the hope that I am talking about is not circumstantial hope. You see, circumstantial hope is found when we look for light in the things of this world. It's finding hope in the grades that we get on tests, the likes on a post on social media, the feedback from our bosses in our job reviews, or the success of our retirement portfolios. And this type of hope, it's just a type of wishing. It's the type of hope that is based on something else. So the minute that we are let down or that we don't receive what we had hoped for, the ground that we are standing on begins to shake. But biblical hope, on the other hand, it is based on someone. It's based on the hope that's found in a relationship with the resurrected Christ, Jesus, the light of our world. Tim Keller says that to have hope in God is not to have an uncertain, anxious wish that he will affirm your plan, but to recognize that he and he alone is trustworthy, that everything else will let you down, but that his plan is infinitely wise and good. Jesus is the one who brings light into our world. And during the Christmas season, we celebrate the coming of Jesus in the form of a baby. And that's really just a story, the beginning of a story of hope. Jesus arrived on the scene as the light to our world, and then he lived a vision-centered life so that hope could be fulfilled in his death and in his resurrection. That light had vision, which brought us hope. Without the resurrection, Jesus' birth and life is just another story of a man who walked this earth and did some good things for the people that he came in contact with. But with the resurrection, Jesus' birth truly is the beginning of the ultimate story of hope. By believing in the birth of Jesus and believing in the resurrection, it means that we have the kind of God who brings light out of the darkest of situations. And it leads for us to put our hope not in our circumstances or our own happiness or on the things around us, but instead on our God who promises to go with us. Ann Voskamp says that hope isn't about thinking something will get better. Hope is about believing that someone better is already here. Jesus was born because he wanted to come and collect his people from the darkness. The light came down and he brought vision of a new kind of life in the kingdom of God. And because of that, we have hope. And I want to take a moment to address those of us who might feel like they are in a deep season of waiting. I've not had to wait 400 years for some things to actualize in my own life. But I will say that I have felt the pain of waiting without knowing if I will get the thing that I am longing for. I'm in my early 30s and I know I'm young and I have a lot of life ahead of me. But I have a deep desire to be married and to have a family. And as it often goes in seasons of waiting, there is a lot that's outside of my control. And honestly, there are seasons of singleness when hope just feels hard for me to hold on to. Trevor Hudson speaks a lot about the gift we have in the nearness of God. And he shares that no matter how hopeless a situation feels, our God is relentlessly seeking to bring light and life where there seems to only be darkness and death. So honestly, this reminder today is as much for me as it is for anyone. God is working in the waiting. He is stirring longings in us, inviting us into deeper waters with him. If we look to the world around us to fill us up and believe that a shift in our circumstances will be the thing that brings light, we will always end up disappointed. One of the responsibilities and the privileges that we have in a Christian community is that we have the ability to bring light to others through our actions and through how we show up for people. Light has come into my season of singleness when people around me incarnate Jesus's nearness through their actions. It's often the little things, a friend checking in on me via text, or being invited into friends' homes for dinner, or something being dropped off unexpectedly on my doorstep. Those simple actions bring light into my life, and they give way for a vision of hope that is outside of my circumstances. But friend, the reality is that darkness has to be felt in order for us to long for hope. When we have a clear view of the hope that we have in the light of the world, we can then acknowledge that darkness is not out of place at Christmas, because darkness is the very reason that Christmas exists. And darkness gives us the opportunity to be a people who radiate hope to the world around us, because we know how the story ends. Darkness does not win. Darkness might throw us into a bit of disorientation for a moment, but the birth of Jesus shows us, as Esau McCulley says, that even in the shadows of the empire, there is a space for hope. And that sometimes in that space, God calls us from the shadows to join him in his great work of salvation and liberation. We are called out of the shadows to help bring light to the world around us. But the question arises, how do we become people who radiate hope to those around us? Well, we need to be people who pay attention to the light. You see, that the interesting thing about this progression, that light brings vision and vision brings hope, is that it doesn't actually just end with hope. As we go through this process of light bringing us vision for a different kind of life, and in turn cultivating a sense of hope in us, we then actually get to become a light to the people around us. The friends that have shown up in my life remind me that I am not forgotten or alone. And they are people who are living out hope in their own lives. That leads me to see light in my own situation. We can do this in so many different ways, friends. I was hearing this week about how y'all are serving your community, the teachers at Iron Horse Middle School, where you meet every single Sunday, that you are showing up this next weekend to fix their teachers' lounge and to make it a better space for them. That is showing up as a light to the community that you are living in. It can be done in such small and practical ways, But the gift of those obedient actions that we step into and the things that we do is that it brings vision and hope to the world around us. It is beautiful. And we don't hold on to our hope and remain silent about it. We have the opportunity to proclaim that hope through our own lives. And then we get to become, as Jesus says in Matthew 5:14, the light of the world. We are never the true light. We can never take the place of Jesus for somebody, but we can be a reflection of his light and hope in our own lives, which points them to Jesus. Don't miss this. As we live as hopeful people and are a light to someone else, it gives them vision for a different kind of life, and then it cultivates hope in them. It's a cycle of hope that is fueled by the light of our world who was sent down. Practically speaking, I want to encourage you in the moments of waiting that you're going to encounter in this next week to look at them a little bit differently. Maybe it is as you are standing in line at a long line for a return or to just check out at the grocery store. Maybe it's in that moment that you bring to mind the reality of the waiting and the season that you are in right now, and that you offer that little moment, that little space as an opportunity to pray that you would be able to be a light to the world around you. Or maybe you just frankly don't feel a lot of hope right now. And maybe, just maybe, in those moments of waiting, when you are standing in line for traffic, or if you are just waiting for time to pass, whatever it looks like this week for you, maybe you use that time as a time to ask God to help bring light and vision into your own life so that you can feel hope. Friend, I don't know what it looks like for you practically. I don't know what you are waiting for or how long it has felt like you are waiting, but I do know that we have a God who cares so deeply about each one of us and who wants to spark hope in our lives. He wants us to experience the joy that we get to go through life with him. And so use those moments, those just on the margin moments this week, to ask for God to show up in whatever season of waiting that you feel like you are in right now. As we train ourselves to look for the light in the mundane and in the waiting and in the dark places of our days, it actually trains us to be people of unshakable hope. As we practice hope in the small things, it exercises our hope-building muscles so that when we encounter the things of life that require large amounts of hope, we already know to look for the true light. We can hold on to the truth of knowing that God has been and will continue to work in whatever waiting season that we find ourselves in. The darkness that we feel around this time of year, because of the short amount of daylight, creates in us a longing for more light. And it serves as a reminder to look for the light. So this Advent season, as we prepare for the arrival of Christmas and the celebration of the birth of Jesus, hold tightly to your friend Jesus. He is holding tightly onto you. He is with you in the darkness, and he is longing to bring light and vision and hope to every dark part of your life. And my prayer for you, Eastown online, and however you are joining, my prayer for you is that the God of hope will fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. May God go with you this week, and would you sense him in the midst of whatever season of waiting you find yourself in.
I count on one thing, the same God who never fails will not fail me now. You won't fail me now in the waiting. The same God who's never late is working all things out. You're working all things out. Oh yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will bless your name. Yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy all my days. Yes, I will. I count on one thing. The same God who never fails will not fail me now. You won't fail me now in the waiting. The same God who's never late is working all things out. Working all things out. Yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. And yes, I will bless your name. Yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy all my days. Yes, I will for all my days. Yes, I will, and I choose to praise, to glorify the name of all names, that nothing can stand against, and I choose to praise, to glorify the name of all names, that nothing can stand against, and I choose to praise, to glorify the name of all names, that nothing can stand against, and I choose to praise, to glorify the name of all names, that nothing can stand against. Oh yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. And yes, I will bless your name. Yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy all my days. Yes, I will for all my days. Yes, I will for all my days. Yes, I will.